Shattered Veil, Chapter 1. The Fall of Solara. The sky above Solara burned crimson, torn open by streaks of plasma fire. The once gleaming spires of the city were now shattered, their crystalline structures crumbling under the relentless assault of the Krylos Dominion. Smoke curled in thick tendrils over the ruins, and the cries of the survivors echoed through the streets. Kayla staggered through the rubble, her silver hair matted with dust and streaks of iridescent blood. Her people, the Solarians, had once lived in harmony with the energy fields of their homeworld, drawing power from the Veil, a mysterious force that connected all living things. Now the Veil was fractured, and the Krylos had come to claim it. Her mother lay beneath the wreckage of their home, motionless. Kyla's heart ached, but there was no time to grieve. The Krylos were advancing, their biomechanical war machines tearing through the city with ruthless efficiency. A distant roar filled the air. Kayla turned sharply, her luminous eyes adjusting to the bright fireball descending from the sky. A Krylos dropship was plummeting, its engines trailing black smoke. But something was different. This ship bore no Imperial markings. It crashed into the clearing beyond the city, sending shockwaves rippling through the ground. Kayla shielded her face from the heat, her elongated ears ringing. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, movement. A figure stumbled from the wreckage, coughing and waving away the thick plumes of smoke. He was different. No armored exosuit, no Krylos cybernetics. His form was compact, muscular, wrapped in a suit of torn, charred fabric. His face was bare, his eyes sharp and determined. A human. Kyla had only heard of them in stories, frightening, unpredictable beings from the far reaches of space. Some called them monsters, others called them myths. But now there was no denying the truth. A real, living human had just crashed into her dying world. The human coughed, then raised his hands slowly, palms out, a universal sign of peace. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice deep and melodic. "My name is Jackson Reed. I'm not here to hurt you." Kayla didn't lower her guard. "A human here? Why?" Jackson exhaled, running a hand through his dark, sweat-soaked hair. "I was trying to escape from them," he said, jerking his chin toward the sky where the Krylos fleet still loomed. "I stole one of their ships, but it didn't exactly go as planned." Kayla studied him carefully. Her instincts warred against her desperation. Her people were dying, their technology was failing, and this human, as strange as he was, had fallen from the sky with the knowledge of the enemy. She made a decision. "You are not Krylos," she said finally, "but you are still unknown. If you wish to prove yourself, then help us. Help us survive." Jackson nodded. "Deal." And so, the fragile alliance was formed, a desperate pact between an exiled human soldier and a shattered Solarian survivor. Neither of them could have known that this moment would set in motion events that would change the fate of both their species forever. Chapter 2. The Veil's Whisper? The days that followed were a blur of motion and exhaustion. Jackson worked tirelessly, using what little technology he had salvaged from the wreckage to construct makeshift generators, power systems, and defense grids. Kayla watched him with growing curiosity. His hands were clumsy compared to the precise, elegant movements of the Solarians. But his mind was something else entirely. He solved problems with a kind of reckless brilliance, adapting their failing technology with a strange mix of human ingenuity and stubbornness. When the Solarian children fell sick from contaminated water, Jackson built a filtration system from scrap. When the Krylos sent drones to survey the wreckage, he hacked into their systems, feeding them false data and buying the city precious time. Kayla had never met a being like him before. His compassion, his relentless drive to help, these were things her people had long considered weaknesses. The Solarians were pragmatic, bound by tradition and logic. Emotion was a tool, not a virtue. And yet, watching Jackson risk his life to save creatures he had never met, she began to wonder, was it truly weakness or was it something else? One night, under the shattered moons of Solara, Jackson and Kayla sat together near the edge of the city. The repairs were holding, the survivors were stabilizing, but the Krylos were still out there, and they would come back. "They won't stop," Jackson muttered, staring into the distance. "They never do." Kayla studied him, her luminous eyes gleaming in the dim light. "And yet you still fight for us, even when you owe us nothing." Jackson sighed. "Back home we had a saying, if you have the power to help, you should. I guess I still believe in that." A slow realization settled in Kayla's chest, a warmth unfamiliar and strange. The Solarians did not experience love in the way humans did. Their species formed bonds through logic, mutual benefit, survival. But this was something else, a connection, an unspoken understanding. And in that moment, Kayla knew. She had seen many warriors in her time, many leaders, strategists, tacticians, but Jackson Reed was different. Not because of his strength, not because of his intelligence, but because of his heart, and that, more than anything, might be the key to saving them all. Chapter 3: The Krylos Return. The illusion of safety was shattered a few nights later. A sharp, keening wail filled the air, the alarm beacon. Jackson was already moving, grabbing his makeshift weapon as Kayla sprinted beside him. They emerged into the city square just in time to see the skies split open. A Krylos dropship descended in a storm of blue fire. It was sleek and black, its hull shifting like living metal. The Solarians panicked, their warriors rushing forward, brandishing their energy staffs. But as the ship's doors hissed open, the warriors faltered. A single figure stepped out. He was tall, his insectoid frame draped in living armor that pulsed with eerie violet light. His mandibles curled into something that almost resembled a smile. Overlord Vylon had come in person. "Ah!" Vylon purred, his voice slithering through the air like oil on water. The human. The Solarian warriors formed a protective ring around Jackson, but Vylon didn't even glance at them. His attention was solely fixed on the man who had dared to defy his empire. "You are an anomaly," Vylon mused, tilting his head slightly. "A human hiding among the weak, a soldier playing at being a savior." Jackson's grip tightened around his weapon, but he said nothing. Vylon took a slow, deliberate step forward. "I could kill you now," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "But that would be wasteful." A flick of his clawed fingers, and a holographic projection appeared before them. Earth, spinning silently in the void. Jackson's breath caught. "You see, human," Vylon murmured, "you are not the only one who can defy expectations. We have been watching your species for some time. Your technology is primitive, but your minds are fascinating." The projection shifted suddenly, showing images of human cities, New York, Tokyo, London, burning. Krylos warships loomed over them like gods descending from the heavens. Jackson felt ice crawl through his veins. "What do you want?" he forced out. Vylon smiled. "A choice. Join me, and your world will be spared." His eyes gleamed. "Refuse, and it will burn." Silence. Kayla's hand instinctively reached for Jackson's arm. "Don't listen to him," she whispered. The Krylos do not bargain. They consume. But Jackson was already staring at the hologram, his mind racing. The fate of Earth and the fate of Solara rested in his hands. The city stood frozen, waiting for Jackson's answer. The weight of the choice pressed against him like a crushing force. If he refused, Earth would be next. But if he agreed, his gaze flickered to Kayla, to the Solarians who had come to trust him, who had relied on him to save them. His fingers curled into a fist. "No," he said at last, his voice steady. "I won't help you destroy more worlds." Valen exhaled through his mandibles, shaking his head in mock disappointment. "A shame. I had hoped you were smarter." A simple hand gesture, and the Krylos troopers moved as one. Then all hell broke loose. Chapter 4: The Final Stand. The city erupted into chaos. Blaster fire streaked through the air, slicing through the crystalline structures and igniting the fragile energy fields. The Solarians fought with desperate precision, their energy staffs whirling in arcs of brilliant light. But the Krylos troopers were relentless, their dark, segmented armor absorbing incoming attacks, their clawed limbs tearing through the defenses with terrifying efficiency. Jackson's heart pounded as he ducked behind a crumbling support beam, pulling Kayla down with him. Heat from a plasma blast scorched the air inches above their heads. "These bastards don't miss," Jackson gritted his teeth, gripping the scavenged Krylos rifle he had modified days earlier. He popped out from cover, squeezed the trigger, and sent a streak of blue energy into the nearest trooper's chest. The alien soldier spasmed before collapsing, his armor sparking. "They are stronger," Kayla said, breathing heavily beside him. "But we know the terrain." Her luminous eyes flicked toward the network of underground tunnels that ran beneath the city, remnants of the Solarians' ancient way of life. "If we can retreat..." An explosion rocked the ground, sending both of them sprawling. Jackson rolled onto his back, his ears ringing. Through the smoke, he saw Overlord Valen striding through the battlefield, untouched by the destruction around him. His towering form moved with unnatural grace, his many eyes scanning the chaos with cold amusement. Valen wanted this. He was enjoying it. Jackson clenched his jaw. "Not today, you bastard! Move!" Kayla yanked Jackson to his feet, and together they sprinted toward the tunnels. Several Solarian survivors had already begun descending into the underground passageways, helping the wounded as they went. A Krylos trooper lunged toward them, his razor-sharp gauntlet gleaming under the fires of the burning city. Jackson barely had time to react before Kayla spun, using her superior agility to leap over the attacker. She twisted mid-air, planting her energy staff against the base of his skull and unleashing a pulse of searing energy. The trooper collapsed instantly. Jackson gave her a breathless look. "Remind me to never piss you off," Kayla smirked. "Then do not give me reason to." They ducked into the tunnels, the cool darkness swallowing them whole. Jackson could still hear the battle raging above, the screams of those who had not been fast enough. His stomach twisted with guilt. They had lost their home again, but they were not finished yet. Chapter 5: The Rebellion Begins. Deep underground, the survivors gathered in a large cavern. The elders stood in silence, their normally serene faces drawn with tension. "We cannot run forever," one of them, Elder Vera, murmured. "The Krylos will find this place, and when they do..." A heavy silence settled over the room. "They will kill us all," Kayla finished, her voice barely above a whisper. Jackson clenched his fists. He had seen this before, on human colonies that had fallen to invaders, on battlefields where resistance had been deemed futile. He had watched people break under the weight of fear. But not this time. "We're not giving up," he said, stepping forward. His voice carried an authority he hadn't realized he had. "If we make our stand here, then we make it count. No more hiding. No more waiting to die." Several Solarians exchanged uneasy glances. "We do not have the strength to win," one muttered. Jackson exhaled sharply. "You're right, but we don't need to win. We need to survive. We make this place a trap. We use the tunnels against them, force them into tight spaces where their numbers don't matter. We sabotage their tech, cut off their communications, and then..." His gaze flicked to Kayla. "We hit them where it hurts." A slow realization spread across her features. The Krylos were not invincible. They had weaknesses, and Jackson, this impossible human, was willing to exploit them all. Kayla turned to the elders. "If we fight together. We trust him." A long silence. Then Elder Vera gave a slow nod. "Prepare the defenses." And so, the final battle began. Chapter 6. The Shattered Veil. Hours passed in intense preparation. Jackson worked alongside the Solarian engineers, rigging the tunnels with improvised explosives made from salvaged Krylos tech. Kayla led the warriors, training them in hit-and-run tactics suited for the narrow underground passages. Every moment counted. Then the tremors began. "They're here," a young Solarian scout whispered. The tunnels fell into silence. Jackson tightened his grip on his rifle. "Let's give them a welcome they won't forget." The first Krylos wave entered cautiously, their bioarmor shifting to adapt to the darkness. Then, the explosions went off. The tunnels collapsed behind them, sealing them in. Solarian warriors emerged from hidden alcoves, striking with precision. The tight spaces nullified the Krylos' numerical advantage, turning the fight into brutal close-quarters combat. Jackson moved with practiced efficiency, covering Kayla's flank as she danced through the battlefield like a wraith, her energy staff carving through the enemy ranks. Then Valen entered. The Overlord moved like liquid death, untouched by the chaos. His armor absorbed energy blasts, his movements too fast, too calculated. Kayla lunged, but Valen caught her mid-strike, his clawed hand closing around her wrist like an iron vise. "Impressive," he mused, his mandibles twisting into something resembling amusement. But not enough. Jackson saw red. Without thinking, he charged. The rifle was useless at this range. Instead, he did something no Solarian would have ever expected. He tackled Valen head-on, a human physically challenging a Krylos overlord. The impact sent them both tumbling. Jackson landed a savage punch against Valen's mandibles, his knuckles splitting on the creature's exoskeletal plating. Pain lanced through his arm, but he ignored it. Valen snarled, tossing Jackson aside like a ragdoll. But the distraction was enough. Kayla recovered, slamming her energy staff against Valen's exposed side. For the first time, Valen staggered. He turned, his many eyes narrowing at Kayla, then shifting to Jackson. And something in his expression changed. "You are not just human," Valen murmured, something unreadable in his voice. "You were something else." Jackson wiped blood from his mouth. "Yeah," he grinned through the pain. "You're damn right I am." At that moment, something inside Kayla snapped into place. She had always believed that Solarians could never understand humans, that they were too different, too alien. But now, watching Jackson, bruised and bleeding, refusing to yield, she felt something shift deep within her soul. A bond, a connection beyond reason, beyond logic. The ancient Solarian soul bond, long believed to be myth, had awakened, and it had chosen him. Her soulmate was human, and together they would tear the Krylos apart. Chapter 7. The New Dawn. The battle ended with Valen's defeat. The Krylos fleet, leaderless and disorganized, retreated. The city was in ruins. But the Solarians had survived, and for the first time in history, they had hope. Jackson and Kayla stood atop the highest remaining spire, watching the sun rise over the shattered city. The veil, though fractured, pulsed faintly beneath their feet, a reminder of what they had fought for. "So," Jackson said, stretching. "What now?" Kayla turned to him, a soft glow in her gaze. "We rebuild. We fight for those who cannot. And," she hesitated, then let herself smile, "we stay together." Jackson chuckled. "Damn right we do." He reached for her hand. She took it, and as their bond pulsed stronger than ever, they stepped forward into a future they would shape together. And so, the shattered veil began to heal, not just for Solara, but for all who dared to hope. In the bond between a human and a Solarian, the galaxy found its spark of defiance, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, unity and courage can light the way. The war is far from over, but the first step has been taken. Together they will rise. Together they will fight. And together they will shape a future where no world is left in shadow.
Subscribe the Unseen Universe.